People are. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am Reverend Tom Capo. I'm the minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. Yay! But I have to admit, this was not my brainchild. This is Ken's brainchild, and he'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And he'll talk a little bit about how this came to be and why we're all here this evening. I want to tell you we are very happy to co-host this event. Unitarian Universalism has 7 principles values that we adhere to and try to live by. Our first value is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And that's what we're really here all about tonight, is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And to learn to really treat each other with worth and dignity, we need to know about each other. We need to be able to talk to each other openly and honestly and respectfully. And so that's what we hope we'll accomplish here tonight, is an opportunity for you to hear some things from our panelists and for you to be able to ask some questions that are on your heart that might help you sort through some of your feelings about the LGBTQ community. And we want that to be, want you to ask those questions that may be a little challenging for you, knowing that our panelists are here willing to answer the questions that you ask. So without further ado, I want to introduce my co-panel moderator. That's what it is, Sadia Covert.
Good evening, everybody. Are you excited to be here? Yeah. Well, happy Pride Month. I am Sadia Covert. I am the executive director and founder of UCare, which is a nonprofit organization that stands for Uniting Through Cultural Awareness and Regional Education. We put on seminars such as these to raise awareness about different groups and different cultures and people. What we believe in is a platform for unity, a platform where everybody can get together, talk about one another, start a dialogue, and create that unity in the community, because that is what we need, that is what makes us cohesive, and unity is what makes our community stronger. So I am honored, UCare is honored. I'd like to recognize our Vice President of UCare as well, Mahfouz Khan. If you can stand, thank you very much. LGBTQ rights, they are rights. They're not privileges. It's a human right. And we need more awareness in communities, because we're all in this together. And if we are going to have questions, hopefully, from all of you, and this is what we're here for, to create that dialogue. And it's important for us to be together. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. Reverend Capo and I will be going through the questions, and anything that sounds ridiculous, I'll just throw it out. No, I'm just kidding. I will read through them. So with that, we will. Couple things. Ground rules.
Oh, yeah, the few things. Yeah. First of all, the restrooms are right outside the door on your left. And you all have cards to write questions on, so don't forget to do that. Dan, raise your hand, Dan. Dan will collect those cards and bring them up to us. And in case you wonder, I biked 20 miles today in the heat, so my body is having a difficult time cooling down. So, but other than that, I'm good. Our plan tonight is to let each of the panelists talk about who they are and why they're here. But before we do that, we want to recognize any political
candidates that are running for office in the crowd. We want to thank them for taking on a tremendous task and making tremendous task in making our community stronger. So whoever is running for elected office, can you please rise and introduce yourselves, and we will start from. Thank you so much, guys.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sheila Rutledge, and I'm running for County Board District 6. And I just want to add that if you're worried about how things happen this week, I picked up 5 campaign volunteers in an hour and a half of canvassing tonight.
Wow.
Hi, everybody. I'm Judge Linda Davenport. I'm the Democratic candidate for the Circuit Court of DuPage County.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Chaplin, and I'm seeking re-election to the DuPage County Board, District 2.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Ellman, and I'm running for State Senate to go to Springfield to represent District 21, which includes Naperville, Wheaton, Lisle, Warrenville, West Chicago, and Carroll Stream, and Winfield. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bridget Fitzgerald. I'm running for the Illinois State Senate, District 41.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Costa Howard. I am running for state representative in the 48th District against Peter Breen. Nothing else needs to be said.
All right. So what we're going to do now is turn to our panelists. You all can sit down, and we'll. And this young lady is running for the county board.
I can't say that. I have a nonprofit. So.
So we're going to start this with Jacob. Would you mind? Do you need a microphone? Here, there's a microphone there, and I'll give you this one. Okay. And so your name, what your affiliation, and what brings you here this evening? This should be great.
Okay, it should be working, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, my name is Jacob Harshberger. People know me as JD. I am the community engagement coordinator at Open Door Health Center of Illinois, and I'm also on the volunteer coordinator for the Sean Casten for Congress campaign. What brings me here today is I've always been an activist. I've been since the age when I came out when I was 16. I started just realizing that I had the passion to lead and to teach and educate the community about LGBTQ people. I just have the passion for it, so it just has continued to lead my life in the way that I'm going. So.
Hello, I'm Ken Mejia Beal, and I'm here on behalf of Patriot Not Partisan. It is a magazine, online magazine. I write about stuff, politics, social issues. The reason I'm here tonight is because I think it's important for DuPage County to have a LGBTQ plus representation. There are a lot of members of the community in this community that have to go outside of the community to feel accepted and to be able to let their hair down and to have a good time. I would like to change that, so that is why I'm here.
Hello, my name's Elaine Coffey. I'm on the board of the Northwest Indiana chapter of NOW, and also the board of the Northwest Indiana chapter of the Green Party. I'm not sure I'm here representing either of those groups. I would just want to say about them that they're both very accepting and valuing of diversity. That includes diversity in sexual orientation and gender expression. I've always felt completely accepted in both of those groups. I'm basically here as a trans woman, here to talk about my experience, and I feel like it's part of my calling in life. I feel like to just talk to people about what it's like to be trans.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Galloway. I'm originally from East St. Louis, but lived in Chicago for the last 11 years. I work for Equality Illinois, where I serve as the Director of Civic Engagement. I also serve as chair of the Black Treatments Advocates Network. For those that don't know what that is a group of individuals and social service agencies dedicated to closing the gap between the disproportionate amount of African Americans living with HIV and our counterpart. So that is a huge issue for me. And the reason why I'm here tonight is I like to always tell people because of my grandmother. My mother had me when she was 15 years old. So that allowed for my grandmother to serve kind of as my mother until my mother actually grew up, right? And I remember my grandmother always fussing at a city council meeting because American Bottoms back in East St. Louis was really kind of, you know, raping the community. And my grandmother stood up at a city council meeting, and I heard her voice actually make a change in the city council. And that planted a seed in me very early on that civic engagement was something that was very important and to be involved in community. And so that is why I'm here tonight.
Happy Pride, everybody. So my name is Kim Hunt. I am the executive director of Pride Action Tank, which is a project incubator and think tank really focused on improving opportunities and outcomes for LGBTQ people and other marginalized groups. Pride Action Tank, or PAD as we like to call it, because everything breaks down to an acronym, is a project of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. I am here tonight most directly because Ken asked me to be here. So I, in my spare time, whatever that is, I co-host a storytelling event that happens once a month at one of the bars in Boys Town in Lakeview in Chicago called Outspoken, and Ken is one of regulars? Yeah, I can say regulars, yeah. And comes to the storytelling event just about every month, and he asked me to be here. But then I think more indirectly to Anthony's point, there is a legacy of women in my family standing up, so it really resonated with me to see all these women running for office. My grandmother and my mother were both rebels in their own way. A lot of times they did their work through the church, which was, you know, the institution where a lot of that happened. That wasn't my experience, however, being a lesbian in a church that wasn't always accepting is now. A lot of work that was done. And so there's a long journey to bring me here tonight. And I'm always grateful for opportunities to talk to folks and to be on panels with folks who are just already doing amazing things.
Hi, I'm Becky Trombley-Freitag. I'm not affiliated with anything. I'm no one special or fancy. Thank you. In a group. I'm a young adult, and I grew up here in DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church, in this church right here, and it's always impressed upon me the importance of speaking up and standing for what you believe in and telling your own truth, and so I am here doing that.
So I thought we're going to collect cards in a minute, but I wanted to start off with a question for each of our panelists, and as much as you would like, share a little bit about your story. Some of the things that influenced you to be the person you are and to do the work that you're doing, and how your sexual orientation or sexuality influenced that, your gender influenced that. Would that be an okay question? All right. Whoever wants to start.
They have the microphone.
Well, I was telling you a little bit before about how I started being an activist as soon as I came out of the closet. Because when I came out of the closet, it was just 1 year later that everyone else kind of like started, for lack of a better term, popping out of the woodwork. You know, like they were just, everyone was coming to me, asking me questions on, how do I do this and where do I go for this? And so I learned that I was to be a leader. And then when I was in college, I was the president of the Gay and Lesbian Club at our college, and my best friend, Sean, he was the vice president, and he had a very much more radical approach to activism. So he wanted to do things like go to the mall and make out with guys just to make sure everybody knew that we were here and we were queer and get used to us. So I kind of had to bring him down a little bit, because my take on the whole thing was you can get a lot further with things like this. Like when you can get a lot further with question and answer, with conversation, with dialogue, than you can with forcing people to understand that you need to be here too. Do you know what I mean? I spent 5 years in San Diego, where I was the assistant campaign director for Marriage Equality USA. We fought for the Prop 8 decision. At that point when I was there, I was also a victim to a hate crime. So because of my experience, I was able, because of my activity in the community, I was able to take that experience and parlay it into hate crime legislation and public safety for our community, which actually started the Stonewall Citizens Brigade in San Diego, which was a volunteer police force that would drive around the community on Fridays and Saturday nights and make sure that the community was safe getting home to where they needed to be, and there wasn't anybody that didn't need to be. So all these things that I've been doing, it's kind of like something's leading me to do that, and I feel like that's very comfortable for me in my life. Being the only person in my family that's gay, I have an extremely supportive family, so the more they push me to do great things, the more great things I want to do, so And I definitely am going through my own personal journey right now with, I came back from San Diego and realized that I could find a happy medium between being Christian and being gay, and there's a life for me in the church. So I've been, in my passions, I've been trying really hard to find the church that's alive for me, that feeds me what I need, and at the same time I could feel very comfortable there. There are a lot of affirming churches that are popping up. I just not need to find the right vibe. So.
I don't really know where to begin with this one. So I never wanted to be an activist. I have never been, until about maybe I was 28, comfortable with who I am as a person. The reason I became an activist, my first boyfriend died in a car accident, and I went through a horrible time, and I could not tell anybody why I was going through a horrible time. So it was a very traumatic experience. And then as I got older, before I turned 30, I had 5 very close friends die of AIDS. It affected me tremendously. And at that point, I said, well, somebody needs to talk to people about stuff, about safe sex, about acceptance, about love of self. And so I started to go to different organizations and talk to people. I started talking to aldermen around the city. I started talking to suburban organizations, and I didn't think anybody was doing a very good job of talking to people. And then I said, well, maybe I should do it myself. So I've been doing it myself, and that's why I do this.
Well, I've followed kind of a long, slow road to get to where I am. I think I've been slowed down by some conventional ideas about transsexuality or transgenderism, which, I think need to be corrected. One idea that's very conventional, and you hear a lot, is that a transgender person is supposed to know, like from early childhood, that that's the way they are. And that's not only true for a lot of people, but it's also not true for all of us. And I'm not unique in that I've basically had like this slow realization growing in me throughout my adult life that I wasn't supposed to be a man. The other thing is, a very conventional idea, goes right back to when they first started doing SRS, is that before you get like permanent changes to your body, you're supposed to see a psychologist and get evaluated to make sure you're really and truly trans. They used to make a distinction between gender dysphoria on one hand and true transsexuality on the other. And I once remember being at a support group, hearing a lecture by a psychologist, and she was talking about this, and I remember thinking, oh gee, you know, I'm not a transsexual, I'm just a, you know, whatever. And I think that's a very destructive idea. Fortunately, the DSM now lists only gender dysphoria. They don't make a distinction anymore, you know. On the other hand, the idea that you need letters from psychologists before you can get a doctor to work on you is slowly going away, but it's going away very slowly. I went to the Howard Brown Center in Chicago for my hormones. They have a so-called informed consent policy. This basically says, you know, if you know what you're doing, you can go, you know, and you're in good physical health, you can go ahead and get hormones. Similarly, when I went for my orchiectomy, the doctor just basically made sure I knew that it was a permanent procedure, and she was, you know, quite willing to do it. But I think if I were to get the full SRS, the so-called sex change, the doctors would still insist on letters. And my thinking is, if you say you are trans, you are trans. It's not up to some doctor to tell you whether or not you're trans, okay? But, so that was another thing that slowed me down. I finally started coming out. I mean, I started cross-dressing in my 20s, and maybe about 20 years ago, I started thinking of myself as trans, but, you know, living half of my life as a man, half as a woman. What kind of made me realize that maybe I need to go full-time was I was dating this guy, and he, first of all, he insisted on taking me out in public, something I didn't do very often, and I realized, you know what, this works, you know. Secondly, he was talking about marriage, which I like to think he was sincere, and I kind of thought, you know what? Yeah, I kind of like being Wayne's wife. That sounds like it might be a nice thing. He also took a picture of me in Millennium Park by the Bean, and a year later I showed that picture to a doctor I was out to, and she looked at it and said, you look happier as a woman. And I said, oh, okay. So, you know, so I've been on hormones for what, 5 years? 5 years, I think, 6 years, something like that. I can't count. I'm a retired math professor. I can't count. But I've been on hormones for a few years, and I've gotten some surgery done. Oh, that's another thing I want to point out. It's not true that all trans people get the surgery. As a matter of fact, only about 30% of trans people get any genital surgery at all. Some feel they don't need it. Some people just can't afford it. It is very expensive. And those of us who get some surgery don't always get the full SRS. Okay, I got an orchiectomy myself. So anyways, you know, here I am.
So I am definitely somebody that you will hear me talk about my grandmother quite a bit, because certainly she was an inspiration to me. And as people who inspire you, they also tick you off too. That I learned, and a very brief story about how I arrived here. So grandmother comes to me on one Sunday morning. I was raised in a Southern Baptist church. I went to Catholic school until I got kicked out for bad behavior. We'll talk about that another time. And I went to public schools, and then I was raised in actually the Southern Baptist church. And so in the Southern Baptist Church, they have very rules around what women should. I mostly heard what women shouldn't do. So you shouldn't wear makeup, you shouldn't wear this, you shouldn't wear that kind of stuff. You can't be behind the pulpit, those kind of things. So in the Southern Baptist Church, they have this thinking called the morning's bench. And for those of you all that have been to a Southern Baptist church, you sit on the morning's bench and wait for Christ to have mercy on you. And so in our tradition, you say, Lord, have mercy so many times. And I guess that you arrived at being born again. So this particular Sunday, so my grandmother had me sit there from the tender age of 5 until I stopped going. I was old enough to make the decision to stop going to church. And so on this particular Sunday, she did not want me to sit on the mornings bench. I said, Mother, why can't I sit on the mornings bench? She says, I'll tell you later. I'm like, okay, that's odd, but okay, Ma. So on the way back home to East St. Louis, I say, Ma, why couldn't I sit on the mornings bench today? Not that I was particularly interested in sitting on the mornings bench, but I was very curious. I was a curious child. And so she says to me, well, the young man sitting next to you is gay, and he has HIV, and we do not know how HIV is spread, Anthony. So I did not want you sitting on the mornings bench. So if you look at me, you can tell I was not born. I was not 17 in 1981, probably, right? When we did not know about HIV. This was 1997. We had more than enough information to know how HIV was spread at that point. So I was ticked off at my grandmother. I'm gonna forgive her in a second. Just wait. So that next day, I went and started volunteering in an organization for called Blacks Assisting Blacks Against AIDS, and when I get involved in something, and Kim will tell you this, I get involved. So I'm really like it becomes my life. And so they eventually offered me a job. I was going to school to be a school teacher, actually, and obviously I'm not a school teacher, and thank God I did not become one. But years later, I came to the realization, and I want to forgive my grandmother. Not only forgive my grandmother, but lift my grandmother up after I just bashed her to you guys. My grandmother had more love for me, I realized this, than anybody in the world, right? And her concern was about me knowing that her grandson was probably gay, was going to be impacted by HIV/AIDS, because the first day of kindergarten, when I came home and told her that a boy had called me a fag, and she said to me, well, you're a special child, and realize that your grandmother will always love you and your family will always love you. You understand that, Toto? That's what she said to me from the age of 5. So I leaned in back on these experiences of a woman that was consistent in her love for me throughout my understanding as a kind of a queer kid that didn't quite understand that he was queer, to having behavioral problems, to having emotional issues, and to loving me to this day. I'm 37 years old next month, and grandmother still puts $100 in my account on my birthday. So, you know, so this is a woman that has really kind of inspired me in so many ways. This is a woman that referred to bisexual people as cross hitters. She did not have the language, right? But she had the love for me all the time. So, so I come from the experience of, activism is a part of the Galloway name. My grandfather served as a city manager for East St. Louis. My grandmother has always been involved in community. And so I didn't know anything else. My grandmother had, when she left government service, she had she has over 50 years of government service with the federal government, with the city governor, with the state government. The woman has so many pensions, but was a phenomenal woman that really cared about community and took, we don't talk about people of color like having pride in their country. But certainly mother had pride in her country, mother had pride in her city, had pride in the people that it represented, because she always was a voice that was there, and certainly she was a voice for me. So that's really about like how I arrived here, because I had no other choice, and those were the examples that I had growing up.
You tell such beautiful stories. So for me, first of all, I have a hard time embracing the word activist for myself, because I see the amazing work that many people are doing, including really putting their bodies on the line for so many different issues, and really stepping in harm's way in a way that, particularly now at 56, I'm not sure that I'm willing to do. But there are other ways to participate. So as you mentioned, this journey of realizing who I am, like you, was slow. I didn't come out until I was in my 30s, and by then I was married and had children. And as my husband and I, or ex-husband, who is a very good friend now, and we have done a wonderful job of raising our children together, and he loves my spouse. He will call her and talk to her before he will talk to me. But you know, we had a journey together that we continue to have because we have children, and that's the thing about coming out. It's not just the individual who is claiming the identity who comes out. It's also the people around them who have their own coming out experience in some way. But as I grew more into the community, I began to have opportunities to participate in some pretty amazing activities. Among them were helping to bring the gay games to Chicago in 2006, and that's a journey that started really in 1998-ish or so. And then I had the opportunity to, well, I should back up a little bit. My background is actually urban planning, and I did a lot of community engagement work in that sphere. So I worked as a planner for Chicago Transit Authority, and much later also created a consulting firm that focused on community and economic development that really centered community in that process. And as I was getting burnt out on that, I moved into the nonprofit sphere and had the opportunity to become the first executive director of an organization on the south side of Chicago that really focuses on Black LGBTQ women, and called Affinity Community Services. And then, you know, part of the journey there was working on the marriage movement and really trying to lift up the voices of people of color around that issue, because initially that was a fight that was very much grass tops and not grassroots. And I had to educate some of the larger organizations in the LGBTQ community about how to really be inclusive and work with various organizations who were doing amazing things on the ground with almost no money. And so the journey has just continued in that way. Opportunities present themselves, and I have had the absolute honor and pleasure of getting to know so many people who are doing, it blows my mind the work that goes on in Chicago in particular. I mean, it is a community organizer's dream because there's so much action going on there, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Basically, I've just been very lucky my whole life. I grew up here, which is a welcoming community. So anything that I came out as, and I've gone through several different iterations and labels and discoveries of myself, and each one was met with, "Oh, that's nice, tell me about that." So, and including in my own family, I've luckily never ran into any interpersonal road bumps or anything, just curiosity and confusion sometimes, but just the acceptance and the love that I felt has allowed me to really be very comfortable with my own self-exploration and encouraging that in other people. And I found that I enjoy doing that in my free time, and if I talk to someone who seems confused or not knowledgeable, I will say, well, do you have any questions? I love talking about this. This is something that really interests me. And as such, I've done a lot of research, and I've talked with people, and I've educated myself, because we don't start knowing these things. We aren't born knowing all this stuff, and even if you are new to the community or just coming out or whatnot, you don't have the same vocabulary, and you don't have the same knowledge that you would for someone who has been in it for, you know, decades before you were even born. And so, and this is an ever-changing community with ever-changing vocabulary and identities and interpersonal and interpolitical, you know, strife, but it's it's an interesting and important topic, and one that is an important thing to, I don't know, demystify and to uncomplicate. It is not a separate community. It is not a separate agenda going on, you know, alongside anyone else. It's something that's happening just in between people, trying to figure out who they are and where they are and how everyone can just live happy and fulfilled lives. And so I'm 25. I'm just getting into what I want to do with my life. I don't know what that is, but I'd like to think that it would be helping people and educating.
Stellar panelists. Thank you. And Ken, amazing job. Thank you. All right, next question. What are common misconceptions that people have about you, and how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate effectively to distinguish these misconceptions?
Oh my God, I've been waiting for that question for all of my life. One of the things that I find that people, particularly in marginalized communities, there's a show called Damages that I absolutely love. Some of you all in the audience may be with, what is her name? Oh my God. Anyway, who? Glenn Close. Thank you. Yeah, somebody out there watches. It's on Netflix. She was talking to a young lawyer about her family, and she's made a quote, and she says, they put you on the pedestal and then complain about the crooks in their necks. And so I want to start my, my little talk on with that quote there. So oftentimes, people forget that people who work in the community are human, too, and that that we do not do not always work at full emotional intelligence. Certainly, I don't all the time, and that that somehow that doing this work somehow gets you closer to God, or closer to a fabulous ending. And for many of us are, just recently at 36, now I've been doing this for almost 20 years, actually 20 years. I did it right in high school. And it took me 20 years to understand that I needed to go first, regardless of what anybody has said. Any criticism that is thrown at me, whatever. Equality Illinois, for instance, is a statewide organization that has 6 staff that works across the state of Illinois. And you would be shocked at the amount of email. I mean, we get a lot of great emails. We get more great emails than we do bad emails. But let me talk about the bad emails for a moment. We get hit a lot because we can't do this and we can't do that, versus people saying, hey, let me step up my game. I want to give a shout out to P-Flag, who's here in the audience tonight. P-Flag has been an important partner with Equality Illinois long before I've gotten there. And since I've gotten to Equality Illinois, and I've always known of P-Flag, but what I want to make sure that we're doing is always lifting up other groups. And also, when you have a complaint about a community organization or an activist, ask yourself, what am I contributing to the conversation? What am I contributing to the fight? I'm going to tell you, if you're leaning on Anthony Galloway to solve problems, to solve every issue, you're going to be sadly hurt. Let me tell you. My mother will tell you, I forgot to call her on her birthday the other day, and she blasted me on Facebook, but that's another story. So if you're waiting on an activist who also had, you know, family issues, we also struggle with our own mental health. I gained maybe about, over the last 7 years, maybe about 60 extra pounds from eating badly, from eating poorly, from, you know, anytime someone wants to meet, they want to meet for a drink, they want to meet for food, you know, and you eat when you're happy, you eat when you're sad. People are always criticizing you. It is okay to sometimes give us a rub on the back and also throw your participation in. It is so wonderful to see so many volunteers. You know, we have 6 employees, but Equality Illinois has hundreds of volunteers that stand and march with us day by day with each activity. So I want to put that out there, that the biggest challenge is that people somehow think that I have all the answers. No, I'm just like everybody else in this room. I just want to make a difference, and I want to be a part of a community that stands with me. And so I'm nothing special. I just really care about the issue, just like the people in this room.
So I agree with everything Anthony just said, and I think part of the question was about misconceptions about you. And so I'll step outside of the queer community and say I think the biggest misconception about me as I walk in the world is that I'm heterosexual. And I think, or completely asexual, which is something that comes as you get more gray hair, because older people can't have sex, right? And so being on this aging journey as a queer woman is really interesting because you almost become invisible. We have in the LGBTQ community a community and a culture that kind of worships youth and worships an Adonis body or whatever the female equivalent of that is, and Aphrodite, Amazon. And that's not most of us. So there's this, if you're not sure about yourself, you can be really torn down, both inside the LGBTQ community and outside. Oh my God. That's when I should have known I was a lesbian.
She's definitely.
One misconception I want to address is that the idea of being gay or lesbian or trans or bi is a choice. If you go to a restaurant and you're looking at a menu and you pick out, oh, I really love that fettuccine Alfredo, that's a choice, okay? But now imagine you're living in a society where everybody looks down on you, puts you down, denies you housing, denies you job, in previous centuries even kills you because of your desire for fettuccine Alfredo. You would probably choose a different pasta, right? Okay? So the very fact that we exist shows that, you know, this is not fettuccine Alfredo going on here, okay? Yeah, there's a choice. You could either be yourself or you could be desperately unhappy, maybe even kill yourself. That's the choice.
Really quick. I think the biggest misconception is that if someone comes out to you, that they are out to everybody. That is a huge, huge problem. You have to be very careful with that. There are a lot of people that will come out to you or come out to a group of people, but they have not come out to everyone. So you have to be very careful when you're addressing it. My gold standard is I keep it to myself unless I hear that person tell someone else. But that's a big misconception.
Real quick, I guess, especially being in younger, I don't know, circles in it, and with the different identities and different pronouns and different stuff thrown around, the misconception I hear most from the outside is like, you all want to be special snowflakes. I've heard that so much, and to me, it's less about wanting to feel special and more wanting to know that the part of you that you feel is different and that you've always felt was different is real, and it's not about being broken. It's about having a community. And so I guess the misconception that I would like to address is that all these words and all these, labels and stuff are to feel special, and it's just to make sense of it and to try to represent yourself in a true way without feeling lost.
So we had a number of questions about family, telling children about your sexual orientation or gender, telling your spouse, telling your boyfriend or girlfriend, telling people in your church community. How did you go about doing that? And was it challenging, and what happened?
It's on. Okay. So as I said before, I come out when I was 15 or 16. When my little brother, who is now going to be turning 26 tomorrow, he was about this big then, and my dogs were out in the backyard, and one was licking the other one's area, and I kind of made a joke, and I said, "Ooh, Waskel's a gay dog," and my little brother, who was about this big, looked at me and he goes, "That's okay, because you are too, and it's none of my business anyway." And so that came from my father. Like, my father had to explain to him that, how I was. But my family has always been very, very open with me, very accepting. My sisters and my mother, they fight to see who's going to come with me to the Pride Parade that year. Like because one has to stay home with the little babies so that the rest of them can go to the Pride Parade. So very open family. So telling people in my family wasn't hard for me at all, except for my father, who lives in West Virginia. He is very rednecky. Yeah, and he grew up in a very small church with my grandfather, who was a Methodist pastor, and he just never really accepted it. So throughout my life, ever since I told him when I was 19, we've consistently had these on and off again relationships, like for the last years, and we've fought physically. We've decided never to speak to each other again for over 3 years at times, and things like that. And he's just always had an issue. So everyone else in my family is just really, really open, and my stepfather kind of takes the role of my father because my father chooses not to have me in his life. So, I mean, thank God I have a stepfather that's so warm and welcoming, because he really steps up when he needs to. So I feel like my life is fulfilled even without my father. So.
Well,
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, do you want to go first? Okay. Let's see. My father passed away long before I came out, so I didn't really have an opportunity with him. It became apparent with my mother that she couldn't even accept my not being a Roman Catholic anymore. After 40 years, okay, 4 decades after I left the Catholic Church, she couldn't accept it. So if she couldn't accept that, I just knew she couldn't accept my being trans. So I basically didn't visit her for the last year of her life to protect myself from her, bigotry. My siblings, my oldest younger brother, when he writes me a letter, doesn't have the dear whatever, just leaves it out. Can't stand to use my name, My sister told me that she doesn't want her son to know about me. He's just graduated from high school, for God's sake. You could probably handle it. But still, she thinks it needs to be a deep, dark secret, which means my relationship with her is pretty much over. My youngest brother, I'm not sure about. I thought he was accepting, but I'm just not sure. I'm out to both of my exes. They're in the audience. They're both good friends. My son is quite accepting of me and his wife. They're both very wonderful people. And those are pretty much all the people I care about. So, everybody else in the world I'm out to, and, they don't like it, but,
So as I mentioned, I had my epiphany, if you will, in my 30s. And, even at that age, even having, my own income and all of that, it's still something you have to work up to do. And I remember, wanting to tell my parents, and really dreading the phone call, but knowing that it was something that needed to be done. And, you know, I worked up my courage. I made the call. I lived in Chicago. They were in Kansas City, Missouri, so it was an over-the-phone conversation. And in both cases, they were accepting right away. You know, I had to tell them I was getting a divorce, and, oh, by the way, I like women. So there was a lot to handle. My kids were pretty young, so they didn't know what was happening other than their mom and dad were splitting up. But, you know, as I said, even though I was in my 30s, it's still, you have these people who you want to be your safety net, your ride or die people, as they say. And the notion of having to experience some rejection from them at any age, I think is just a little jarring. But for me, it has not been a hardship. My family has been very accepting. That doesn't mean there aren't times that I have to have conversations with people about the words that they're using and to examine them, particularly teenage boys who like to use the F word a lot. But after multiple conversations, they got it. And, you know, I have a nephew who is not, as he says, is not down for homosexuality, but he loves his aunt. So I won't say it's fine, but, you know, we're working it out. So I know that I am very fortunate compared to a lot of folks.
And I have to share that same sentiment. I think I came out when the doctor said it's a boy. Assign me my gender. There was no coming out for Anthony. Anthony was out at 1. It was very clear that I was a different kid. And I was different from the rest of the boys in East St. Louis. And that I wasn't anything like the girls. And there was never any coming out for me. It just didn't make sense to come out to someone that was already innately. I believe I came out innately who I am. And so what ended up happening as a result of that is that the good thing that came out of my life was that I came from the position of I don't force myself onto people. Like, if you don't want to be a part of this fabulousness, you don't have to be. Like, I'm very clear. Like, I am very clear about who I am as an individual and what I bring to the table in my relationships with people. When I am a friend to you, I am dedicated as your friend. I am your ride or die. And so, like, I had a situation where a cousin, one of her friends came over one particular day, and her friend, beautiful woman, quite honestly, I was physically attracted to her. And she was, oh, she's coughing at me. Oh my God, you can't believe it. But I thought she was absolutely a beautiful woman, and we made a connection in that moment. And my cousin was like, well, why do you like him? He's a effing fag. And my aunt, my great aunt, who's in the other room, who is a very lovely woman, she's now deceased, very lovely woman. My cousin tells me later that she was whimpering in her room because she heard her knock me down that way. And so I think I have tried to live my life as an example of, not all the time. Like, I am not a perfect being by any means. Actually, I go home at night and I have, like, very real struggles, like, in my own personal coming of myself. I struggle every day with things. But what I am very clear about is that my identities are not going to be up for discussion with anyone. That includes my mother. That includes my grandmother, who you all know I love at this point. I'm not going to apologize for that. And so people in my life have kind of like, you know, I don't know how they treat, even in high school, like the gay people were picked on. People did not come at me like that. I don't know why it was, but people did not, and when people did come at me, in the occasion that a person did, people had my back. Because I always walk through the world with confidence around my sexual orientation and my blackness. Those are two things that you can't take away from me. And so I think if we all kind of led from that position of requiring people to treat you well, and if you're not going to treat me well because of these issues, then you don't deserve to be here, is the position I've taken. So.
Personally love a society eventually where coming out didn't need to be a thing because we didn't assume anything about anyone. And I've worked with kids since I was 13, and I have found that whenever anyone says, what about the children? How will we explain? Kids are learning things all the time. You have to tell them, you know, like really, no, you won't really run into a tiger going down the street. That's just not something that you have to worry about. And they'll say, oh, okay. And so if you go about it with the same thing where it's like, well, there are some boys who marry boys, and there are some girls who marry girls, and there are some people who don't marry anyone, and, you know, all this stuff, they'll say, oh, okay, because they just were like, oh, I didn't know that. And so if they're confused, it's not because of some innate strangeness about LGBT-ness. It just has to do with what has been impressed upon them by society and by people who don't understand. And so kids will be fine, and everyone else will be fine if we just stopped assuming anything about anyone else before you know it. Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Live streaming in the
my apologies to the live stream. My niece is 11 years old. Her name is Anaya. For the last 2 years, she's come with me to Springfield Pride Fest. That happens in May. May 19th, I pick up my little niece in Springfield. We go over to the Springfield Pride Fest. She looks at me and she says on the way, Uncle Anthony, do you have a boyfriend? And I said, no, I don't have a boyfriend, sweetheart, and mind your own business. That's none of your business. She says, well, the reason why I'm asking is because I want to hook you up.
So we had multiple questions on how to be an ally in different senses. The political sense, how can elected officials, once they're elected, help you at the state, county, federal level? How can schools help you? How can families help you? How can the community be a better ally for all of you?
So for anybody that follows me on Facebook, one of my biggest pet peeves are politicians in the month of Pride. Not the ones here, however. I like you all. All of you. No, but one of my biggest pet peeves are there are a lot of politicians that become very, very proud of the community in the month of June, and they pass legislation, they ignore us, they will not call us back for the rest of the year. There are politicians that completely pass legislation for the simple, that hurt the community, impact it very, very deeply. Cutting social programs, not allowing, especially in the urban areas, education on items such as PrEP, kills the community. And those same politicians will show up at the Pride Parade and march and make it about themselves. So that is one of my biggest pet peeves. It's a big way not to be an ally. Best way to be an ally politically is to listen to the LGBTQ community all year round, not just June. We are a part of every community. Every community, the black community, Hispanic community, Islam community, the Jewish community, we're everywhere. So that is the best way to be an ally, is not to just care about us in the month of June, but all year long.
So when I was in college this last time, I was a political science major. One of the papers that I wrote were on the concept of social capital. And I refer to my community in San Diego when I talk about this a lot, because the San Diego community, they really had a lot of social and political capital that really helped every community organization become friends with other community organizations that made it stronger and stronger and stronger. So I think the most important thing and the loudest voice and the biggest change we can make is if we have very strong social capital. So those social programs that we have, if they can, we try to make them cohesive and work together and build a bigger voice. Because the worst thing you could possibly do is take your loud voice and break it up into little tiny pieces by making smaller groups of people, because this person needs this type of organization and stuff like that. So you don't have that cohesiveness. So it's really important for your community organizations just to make sure you have a forum where they can come together, be stronger, create change with a louder voice. So.
As you've probably gathered, we come out to ourselves in all sorts of different ages. A lot of us do come out as children, and children are particularly vulnerable, to what their parents say, to what their friends say, what happens in school, to teachers and so on. So I think it's important, especially to be an ally to a child who comes out. So if a child comes out, take them seriously. It's not just a phase, okay? Respect their choice for what they think their orientation is, what they think their gender is. If they're trans, use the right pronouns. Whether it's, if it's a trans girl, that person's a she. If it's a trans boy, that person's a he. If the person's not binary gender, then they're different systems, but they're probably a they, okay? That's important, because if you use the wrong pronouns, you're undermining a person's sense of identity. Now the thing is, mistakes happen, okay? I make mistakes myself, okay? If you make a mistake, if you accidentally misgender somebody, don't make a big, huge deal out of it. Just apologize and go on. Oh, sorry, I meant she. And just go on, okay? That lets the person know that that you respect their identity.
I bet if we in the room did a asset map in this room, we will find that we will not be able to complete it tonight, right? There's so many assets in this room right here. So I want to leave room for people to be able to use their skill sets to be able to be an ally in this space. But I know one particular way of how you can be an ally tonight for Equality Illinois. Renee, would you please wave? Okay, so Renee there is our outreach fellow, outreach fellow for the summer at the university, from the University of Chicago. We're very happy to have her. She started last week in the thick of Pride and just got to working. And poor her, she has been really hitting the ground running. But we brought with us the Illinois Curriculum Inclusive Bill. As you know, that bill passed the Senate. When I say the Senate, I should be clear. The Illinois Senate, the state Senate here in Illinois a couple months ago. It went to the House Oversight Committee where it passed, and it has stalled. And it's not stalled because of, let's say, downstate Democrats or Republicans. It's stalled because right here in the Chicagoland area, some folks have held their votes on it or have not told us where they are in the vote. So we put it on hold for the time being, and we're going to revisit it in the veto session. But this is how you can be an ally. You can sign our petition today before you leave and let your state legislator know, your state House member know that this bill is important. The reason why LGBTQ history is important to be taught in schools is not because of gay kids. Let me just say that. Not just because of LGBTQ kids, but because of heterosexually identified kids. Why do we think that's important? Well, when people know the full throttle of their community, they are able to operate in a much higher thinking than they have had before. So, like, for instance, take me for instance. I thrived as a high school student, but I think about the kid that sat next to me, the football player, that had no access to LGBTQ people in the world. And when he got into the world and met a trans person, he did not know how to interact. LGBTQ people, as Brian Johnson said at our gala, and I want to applaud him because he just adopted a daughter. That's our CEO. His adoption was final last week, which is why he could not be here tonight because he's on paternity leave. But one of the things that I like to remind people of is that LGBTQ people are not asking for our permission, for folks' permission to be at the table. The fact is, we have to be at the table. Black people have to be at the table. Hell, the amount of women that stood, I didn't see any men. I think men, we need to just sit down at this point because I did not see one man stand up running for office, which I actually think is a good thing, right? As a person, as a former employee of Planned Parenthood. But what we have to start getting to a point of is really recognizing that allyship looks very different in many ways, and that could be just talking to your friend who is a Trump supporter. I'm not bashing Trump supporters, I shouldn't say that, but what I am saying is that, you know, just like some of the policies out of the administration, how harmful that is, talking to friends about that really is a form of allyship. When you see that black people are like, the woman calling the police on someone for barbecuing, for selling lemonade. White people have stood up and said something about that. White people have stood in solidarity. I want to give white people credit for that. There have been white people, great white people who've acted out on that. And there could be good, straight, heterosexual folks that speak out on those same things. When you hear someone misgender someone, simply correct it in a loving way. Like, I don't believe in arguing with people and yelling and shouting people down. That's up to my other activist friends to do that. I want to hear how the person is thinking. I want to hear from them. So, oh yes. I told someone I wake up every morning and start my cup of coffee, and while that cup of coffee is brewing, I read Ken's page. But yeah, so that's how I think allyship looks. Make sure you sign our petition if you can, because we need you. And this is a critical time because LGBTQ history being taught in schools is something that is the next step to marriage equality. We didn't just stop at marriage equality. People need to know their sense of identity. And Brian talks about this all the time. You know, as a black person, my grandmother gives me a sense of pride every day around being a black person from East St. Louis. I am innately born into a family of black people who are proud. Jewish folks, same thing. Greeks, I could go, Catholics, I can go the gamut. LGBTQ people are not born into families, right? We create families based on, and we've done it quite well with not having LGBTQ history. Think about what this could do for our community and how it can help transform all of us in making sure that we have a much greater and fairer society.
Show up and be curious.
So, Ken, this might be one for you. So there were a couple of questions about how do you engage in a conversation with someone who may not be as supportive of the LGBTQ community?
I yell at them. No, I'm joking. I don't yell at them. So at the end of the day, everyone has a right to their own opinion. I respect everyone's opinion. I don't ask anyone to accept my sexual orientation. But what you will do is respect me as a human being. It's quite easy. So that's how I answer that question. It's not about accepting everything about everyone. I've been a vegetarian for 16 years. Thank you. I don't go around preaching about it. I don't knock anyone's steak out of their hands. I just tolerate it. And I do feel that we have to, as a society, accept certain things about certain people. It does not infringe on respect, though. So that's how I handle that.
Anybody else?
Yes. He said it. Okay.
You're supposed to ask the next question. 'Cause I did.
Well, that's not true. Ken actually knocked the steak out of my hand. No, just kidding.
I had a few drinks that night.
Well, you want to ask this one?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. What do you think that full equality for LGBTQ folks will look like, and what is that full equality?
Full equality is not having to have a forum where we have to discuss the proper ways to treat people. I think full equality is where everyone treats everyone with respect, regardless of race, sexual orientation, sex, gender. We should just treat each other with respect. That's full equality.
So very recently in the news, you can see something about a Supreme Court justice that's going to be happening soon. So our equality that we've fought for so many years, and where we've gotten at this point with marriage equality and a lot of our rights, is in jeopardy again if this happens the way that they say it's going to happen. And at that point, we will still be fighting the same fight. We will still be continuing to do exactly what we're doing. Full equality for a lot of the community is just not needing to be able to stand up to fight. There's no need for that anymore. You know what I mean? When you can sit down and be completely comfortable that your community is going to accept you and you don't have to fight, you don't have to have a voice, and you don't have to try to collect people, then it becomes more of a full equality for everybody.
I think when we talk about equality for the LGBTQ community, we talk about it as though equality has happened in the broader society. And it hasn't. We all know that. It's hard to know, hard to even be able to name what full equality looks like in this community. We have no concept of that in our American culture. So this is where I think we have to really stop talking about the LGBTQ community in a silo. You really have to think more broadly. We all have different identities that put us in various communities and also put us in various jeopardies and positions of privilege in various communities and in relation to various communities. And so ultimately, even though from, a very practical sense, from a political sense, and, just the models that we've set up, we talk about equality in these very narrow ways. We've got to broaden this, and it's not just the LGBTQ community. It is just across the board. So I have a really hard time talking about equality in the LGBTQ community because I don't know what equality looks like in America.
I said I wasn't going to say anything else, but I am going to say it. I think what equality looks like next is when we start changing the question, start changing the conversation to equitable, meaning that we're removing barriers, having free access to health care for all is something that I think many people in the room may agree with, right? But removing the barriers for people actually accessing that health care, when we start having those conversations, I think we could pivot from the conversations around equality, because I think equality is actually pretty simple, right? I think more so equity, the conversations around equity becomes more of the concept that we have to start getting people to kind of understand. So, I may not, although I have free health care now, I have to drive 2 hours to get to my doctor for my transgender health services. Well, I have free health care, but I can't use it. You see what I mean around equity? So I think we need to start having conversations around that. And I think when we start talking about that, I think we're going to move the needle a little further.
Essentially what everyone else has said, that, and going back to what I originally said, that the LGBTQ community is not a separate community. It's not something happening parallel with everything else. It's about intersectionality, it's about feminism, and it's about classism, and it's about people of color, and it's about fairness. It's about being fair and meeting people where they are, instead of saying, well, here's, you have to be this high to ride. Well, some people are not going to be that high to ride. It's about being fair, and it's about working on everything instead of focusing necessarily in one place. It's about raising everyone up.
So I'm a minister, so one of the questions that stood out to me, because I've been an ally with the LGBT community for a long time, is that a lot of LGBTQ people have had negative experiences with religion. So much so, I did a presentation with a rabbi and myself and a Buddhist monk, and it was still, even though we were very open, you could see that a lot of the feelings were still very raw in a lot of people from the LGBT community because of the bad experiences that they've had. So how does religion affect your experience as an LGBTQ person?
When I was probably 22, 23, I was living in Florida, working at Club Med. I was a dancer for the dinner shows. And I was down there having a great time. My grandparents on my dad's side came down to visit me, and they brought me to dinner. We were sitting at dinner, and I had absolutely no idea that they knew I was homosexual because I hadn't told them. But I have a sister with a loud mouth. So we're sitting at dinner, and my grandfather, who is the Methodist pastor, tells me, "We were angry to find out that you came to Florida." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because we didn't want you to break up with Dan." And I was like, I almost choked on my steak. Vegetables? Yeah, so I was just very astonished, because that was how my grandfather came out to me, that he knew that I was a gay man. So that being said, he's a Methodist pastor in a very small town, but he was able to say this to me, and my father is still not able to have that relationship with me, but that's completely another side. But my journey with religion, when I was younger, I kind of felt like I either had to be one or the other. You learn that because of all these scriptures in the Bible, it says that you cannot, if you're going to be gay, you're going to hell, or however it says. So you had to choose whether you're going to come out as a homosexual and be proud of yourself as a gay man, or you had to try really hard to be a good Christian. My friend Sean went to Exodus in San Francisco for a good, probably about 6 months. And after 6 months, he had to quit because he just couldn't deal with it, which brought him to where he is now, kind of sort of a PTSD situation where he just deals with it on a level that he just can't explain. He swings like a pendulum, but at the same time, when I came home from San Diego with my journey, finding these books that I read and finding this gay church that I went to and finding my happiness with God, I came home and I shared that with him, which helped him to also find that for himself. But I mean, there's a couple different books out there that really, really helped me to understand that, you know, a lot of things, the clobber passages and stuff like that, there's 6 of them that, you know, they were written, you have to really dissect, look at the history, look at the time, look at the, you know, what they really meant. And then it kind of frees you. There's a book out there called The Children Are Free. And it's the very first book that I read. And it explains exactly all those clobber passages, and explains exactly what those meant and why they were written the way they were. And it helped me to free myself and understand that I can be a gay man and a Christian man at the same time. So.
Well, my history, I mean, there's sort of, well, okay, as you probably gathered from what I said earlier, I left Roman Catholicism 40 years ago, and I came out to myself much more recently than that, so it wasn't like Catholicism was in the way. I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, you always have Catholic guilt, I mean, that never goes away, but, you know, sort of like, yeah, I mean, I left Roman Catholicism. Later on, I discovered paganism, which is what I am now. Paganism is pretty much open to, you know, people of different orientations and gender expression. I was at this pagan event recently, and there was some talk about how pagans need to do more to make room for non-binary gendered people. But, you know, they're having that conversation. You know, I'm proud to say I'm involved in that. You know, so the point is, the pagans are pretty open-minded in that way. So it hasn't really been an issue. I mean, I've been coming to this church, like to the Duckies, the pagan group, for well over a year, and it's been great. So.
I think for me, there's certain elements of the church that has been very toxic and has been quite responsible for the death of many of my friends. I'm just, like, I hate to be, you know, I hate to be negative, but I'm just going to be honest here for a second. There are certain friends who are like 6 feet under who didn't quite make it to 30 because of their toxic relationship with the church. And they were responsible too, right? So I don't want to, well, maybe not. Maybe it was just so powerful that they could not do away with it. But religion has a way of really having people feel guilty, walking through their lives feeling guilty about who they are, and they do things in secret, and they don't come up and ask questions. And then somewhere down the line, they're in the hospital, and you're by their side, and then they're no longer with us. And so the relationship that the church has had with certain community group people, and then it doesn't just hurt that person, because what happens is that, like Ken said, before the age of 30, he had 5 friends who died. And that is still happening. We think that ended in the 1980s, folks. That did not end in the 1980s, folks. I'm going to a funeral tomorrow. I'm going to a funeral tomorrow for a 37-year-old, okay? So, like, let's be clear. The church as an institution, not individual churches, but as an institution in certain communities, have really kind of dogged people, and instead of helping them. I walked into a church, a religious event, I think 11 years ago in St. Louis, and there was hundreds of people in this room at the St. Louis Community College, and I walked in as the vice president of Pride St. Louis, and I just walked in because I was invited to be there. And the pastor started going into a anti-gay speech. And lucky enough, I'm strong, and I got up and I said, I don't have to listen to this crap. And I got up and walked out. But I think about my friends that don't have that. Like, there's certain capacities that I don't have that others have, and vice versa. So let's be thoughtful about that also. I think that we got to think about, like, while this is a very progressive church here, that there are many churches right here in our communities that really kind of enslaved people in their thinking around who they are. And enslavement of the mind is very toxic. It is a very hard thing because these folks start to think that the church is looking at them as that they are loved by them. And it's like, and I hate to use abuse, but it is. It's like the time my mother got slapped by her husband, and she says, but he loves me. Same concept, because you can't hit me and pronounce in the same sentence in the same moment that you love me. That is an oxymoron. Maybe the church does love me, but you can't say that in the same sentence with being gay is wrong and you're going to hell. It doesn't make sense, does it? I see folks shaking their head.
I think you've done that really well. I don't have anything to add.
Oh my God. Is that my way of saying shut up?
No. Like I started out with saying in my introduction, I grew up here in the Unitarian Universalist Church, and we are a welcoming congregation. We're a religion that is about social justice and about equality and is about search for truth and meaning together in community. And so I've been very, very fortunate to have grown up with the very solid knowledge that I belong here. I belong here and I belong as who I am. And I'm able to say that. And I have had no question that if someone within the church has a problem with who or what I am, it is not the whole speaking, and it is not a judgment of myself, it is that person. And if there's anything that I feel toward the spiritual abuse of that sort of thing with LGBTQ people, especially children, it has made me angry, because to me, religion should make you feel happy. Religion should enrich your life. It should be the thing that you choose to partake in because it is helping you live your best life in the best way that you can be, not necessarily because someone told you that is the right way, but it is because you have decided that that is what helps you become your best person. And to see that used as a bludgeon and as a weapon to say you're wrong, that's not your place, and that is not your job. To me, religion, religion's job to tell you that you are wrong and you are bad and you should not be that way. It is there to be some place where you feel that you belong because that's what you've chosen. And I have seen people of all different faiths be on both sides of the spectrum, being LGBT or being allies and being virulently against it, and in all religions. And so the capacity is there for love and for destruction, and it is important to recognize that there is the difference between the church as an institution and the church as a people. And it's the job as the church as the people to start making those waves and to start saying, well, hold on a second, because who says?
This community out here in Naperville is wonderful. It's great. I love Naperville. I'm biased because I'm a Napervillian. But my mother just gave me news today. She didn't tell me this before, and she said the Islamic Center of Naperville just had its newest member, a lady who converted to Islam, and she is transgender. And all the women are so thrilled to have her. She's 6 feet tall, so she's taller than all the other women, and everyone wants to be her best friend. And everybody's really, really happy about that. I was so surprised by that. And my mom was like, "Why are you surprised?" I'm like, "No reason." So we're gonna segue into our next question. And I think this fits well because we were talking about issues with depression, struggles. Would you like to discuss the mental health or special needs or issues or concerns within the community and how the community deals with that, or if you have any advice for people in this room that they can go home with?
Depression is very common amongst especially young LGBT youth, and it's also common amongst LGBT seniors for the same reasons, invisibility. I call it the gay loneliness, which is, as Anthony discussed earlier, you grow up around people that are not like you. Regardless of your race or your religion, everyone in your house is someone you can relate to except on that issue. So you are very much alone in that issue. And then you get out of the closet and you find people like you and you get really excited. And then you realize that they are going to tear you down. And that is where the body dysmorphia comes in, and the alcohol abuse and the drug abuse. Because now you've met people like you, and you're still as lonely as you were when you knew no one like you. It is a very difficult transition. So what happens is, after you get through all that, and it's different for everybody, but you realize that you've never gotten to the place where you got to love yourself. So then you do that much later. And then that's when the depression kind of ends for a lot of us, those that make it out. But it's very common amongst most people that I've talked to. I've experienced it. It's a long time of just feeling very alone and feeling like there's no one in the world that you can talk to. And when you find those people and it turns, it is the worst feeling in the entire world. So that is a lot of the mental anguish that a lot of the LGBT community go through. So the one thing I will say is that when someone does talk to you, from any walk of life, but especially this community, and they are giving you a lot of they're laying it all on the table, just try to listen, try to be supportive. Because the one thing that I will say is when you're in that gay loneliness, you're not going to keep talking over and over again. You're going to probably talk to 2 to 3 people, and then you're going to shut down. And the shutdown leads to the drug abuse, the alcohol abuse, the anorexia, and in most cases, the suicide.
One thing about our society that I think we really need to work on is that we have like these, I don't know, certain criteria, certain standards that we think are like ideal. You know, men are supposed to look this way, you know, and women are supposed to look that way. And I think all of us tend to like kind of compare ourselves to these ideals and kind of tear ourselves down because we're not as, you know, taller or shorter, as thinner, or as muscular, or as pretty, or as whatever. And you can always find something wrong with yourself, okay? It's especially acute for trans women because we look at ourselves and we see all sorts of things wrong with our body. I mean, too tall, my hands are too big, you know, things like that. And you know, a lot of trans women really struggle with you know, dysphoria about their bodies. And I think, you know, what you need to do is just learn to accept yourself. You know, my body's my body. It's the only body I'm going to have in this life. You know, I might get some surgical intervention, but to change it a bit, but it's the body I have to live with. I got some very wise advice from a Unitarian Universalist minister once. I was talking to her and I said, you know, well, I'm never going to be a very pretty woman. And she said, well, a lot of born women aren't all that pretty either, so it's okay.
I guess, yes to all of, I agree. I guess the thing that I would say, or the message that I would want to impart to anyone struggling with that, whether they're old or young or somewhere, older, I'm sorry, older, self-identified. anyone who's struggling with those issues is that you are worth the effort of trying to find yourself. You are worth the effort of trying to feel loved by other people and by yourself. And you don't have to have it worse than anyone else to get help. Because someone could come from a completely, I don't know, accepting community or something and still feel gender dysphoria, or still feel the body dysphoria, or still feel that there's something wrong with them just from society's messages, and think, oh, well, at least I'm coming from, you know, a place of acceptance. At least I have this, at least I have that. There is no threshold for badness in order to try to help yourself. If you feel badly and you want to feel better, you deserve to do that.
All right. So we had some questions about transgender, particularly people under the 18, and hormones and surgery, and one other thing I would just add is that when I talk with youth who also talk about not necessarily feeling they're in transition to anything. They just may be who they are. But talking about youth who are under the age of 18 who are wondering about things like surgery and hormones and that, what are some of your thoughts or anything you'd like to share about that?
One thing I think, speaking as an older woman, at the pagan event I just went to, I was formally declared to be a crone. I'm very proud. I'm a crone. I think that a lot of times, you know, young people don't have perspective, and I think they can be very dangerous. I was at one of these meetings where we're talking about gender issues and paganism. I heard and read a suicide note. That what happened was this young woman basically came out to herself as trans, and she came out to her family, and they were, you know, for religious reasons, were not at all accepting. The sort of therapy she got was to go to these, you know, so-called counselors, these Christian counselors who basically didn't validate who she was and tried to talk her out of it. And of course, there was no chance at all that she could go on hormones. And she was under the impression that she needed to go on hormones right away because, you know, when you're young, the hormones work better on your body. You make faster and better progress. And so she thought, you know, she really needed to get on the hormones right away, and she couldn't. And basically she gave up and she took her own life at the age of 16. What I thought was especially sad about this, it occurred to me, you know, if she could just have waited 2 years, she could have, you know, left her parents and just, you know, gotten out in the world, and would have been a hard life, but she could have lived on her terms. But, you know, she couldn't wait. And I'm not faulting her, I'm just saying that, you know, that was the trap she was stuck in. So, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking that I would like to say to young people that, yes, it's good if you can start early, physically. Hormones work better when you start younger, you know. But from a social point of view and an economic point of view, it does get easier, okay? When you're 18, you're an adult, okay? When you get to be retirement age, you don't have to work anymore, so the job isn't an issue. I'm privileged in that respect. There's one good thing about being a crone. So, I don't know, in terms of whether or not it's a good idea, I'd say that, yes, if the young person's sure that that's what they want to do, the hormones work better when they're young. If circumstances get in the way, then they should know that it does get better. Hope that answers the question.
So I work at Open Door Health Center of Illinois, and we deal with a very large population of LGBTQ people. Also, when I was in San Diego, I spent 3.5 years at Family Health Centers in San Diego in gay men's health, which also dealt with a lot of different LGBT issues. But what some people might not understand is when someone wants to transition, sometimes there's a very large population of people that are trying to transition that don't necessarily have the funds or the health care to get that done, so they go and find it other ways in black market. They go to get black market hormones, and then those become really expensive. So a large portion of that population will turn to sex work to actually get the hormones that they need, because that's the way that they really know that they want to change. They really know that they want to transition. So they're doing what they can to get there. And sex work is, you know, I wouldn't just say by any means it's an easy way, but sex work is a way for them to get the funds that they need to get the work that they do. That in turn also brings on other challenges, which is HIV and STIs and everything like that. So they get into a deeper hole just because of, you know, they might get an infection or become HIV positive or something. And then they're dealing with that as well. And then sometimes I experienced in the San Diego community when I was there, if the young kids were transitioning and going through the path that I drew out for you, sometimes once they got HIV, they were considered to be disabled, so they got a disability check. So that would make them not go to work because they were young, they were getting this check, everything was cool, they could do it. And then, as we all know, when there's a latent mind, they get into other things. So then we also had to add another layer on top of some of those people that got into drugs and they got into heroin or meth or something like that, because they just kind of like they didn't have to go to work, so they found other things to do. And you know, then we're dealing with a lot of different layers at that point. So I mean, it just gets a lot more challenging.
So it's not all bad. So I want to point out, there are, so one of the projects that we have at Pride Action Tank is called the Chicago Restroom Access Project. The acronym, yes, is CRAP. So, and we are so fortunate to have parents of trans children on our working group. And many of them meet regularly, sometimes at the Center on Halsted, sometimes other places, to discuss these issues. Because these are parents who are accepting of their children, and they want to make sure that they do the right thing by their children, but they want to make sure that they are being mindful that young people are developing, and sometimes things change as you grow older. So, you know, each of these situations is unique, and I would encourage young people and parents of young people who are trans to come together and to join one of the groups at the Center on Halsted. Having driven out this way, I know that's a hike, but it might be worth it until there are enough folks who can come together in various communities to have these discussions. And there's a lot of research out there, and some of it is pointing to the fact that when a kid tells you that they do not identify with the gender that everyone else says they should identify with, that actually sticks for a lot of folks. So, we just have to match kind of the laws with what's happening, with what we're learning more and more and more about gender.
So is Palatine a part of this county? No. Okay, don't let me have it.
We're from the city.
So there's a project, a really cool project. It started as a national project. It's called the Gender Cool Project. Folks may have heard of it. Jennifer Grosshandler and Gira Goldstein are founders of this particular cool project that highlights the assets of the trans community. So I want to make sure, and that is happening not in Chicago, but right here in the collar counties, right? Where these cool projects are launching into a national scale. They were featured on Good Morning America last week. I also want to give you all this statistic about how resilient the trans community is. There is an awful lot of sex work that happens in trans communities. And I don't want to call it sex work. Let me call it survival sex that happens. But you will be surprised that folks who are participating in survival sex are less likely to get an STI or get HIV than any other group. Real quick, do you know why that is probably? Exactly. Exactly. The reason why they're able to do that is because they are able to, because they've done this and they know how to take care of themselves in doing this. And so sex work is something that is not necessarily stuff that folks want to be doing, but folks have figured out a way to take care of themselves while they're in that transition process.
I have a lot of trans friends of all sort of age groups below me and my peers and above me, and I think that visibility is a huge thing. Seeing the success stories and seeing the people who are 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 and above saying, I'm happy. And there are some people that started when they were 40 or started when they were 50 or 60 and saying, you know, you're no less of who you are because of when you started or when you realize this about yourself. And so visibility is a huge thing and community is a huge thing. I know that this church is a host to Youth Outlook, which is a really cool group for trans youth and queer youth. And it's just so wonderful because there's sometimes that I'm here with other groups and they come down for their snack break or whatever and they're just running around and they're so happy and they have their pronouns on their name tags and they introduce themselves and they are so confident and they are so happy. And maybe that's just because they're here in this space, but at least they have that. And so visibility and community are so important for young people and support. So if you know a young trans kid, I don't know, reach out at some point, find some nice way to affirm them and to say, you know what, I see you and I believe you and you are not young and stupid and going through a phase. You are who you are.
I want to build on just what you said about the Youth Outlook. They are cool kids. I mean, we had them do a service here once, not too long ago. Their parents gave them an okay to be able to come up here and talk, and they're secure in themselves because they have a support system. It's just amazing. So I want to thank our panelists. We're going to do one more thing, but let's thank our panelists.
Okay, now we're gonna do something different because I love interactive panels. So everybody in the room, we're gonna pass around the microphone. You will get up and think. Oh, you could pass the microphone.
You can pass if you don't want to say.
Say what?
You can pass if they don't want to.
Right. You have an option to pass on this if you do not want to participate, but we'd like to hear some action items. What are you going to do when you go home? What are you going to take away from this, and what will you do? Now, you have 10 seconds to think about it. And if you don't want to answer it, it's okay. So we have Judge Linda Davenport right there. And if you could stand for us so we could see you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. I sit in divorce court, and I have for 12 years. So I deal with children all the time who have their own issues just because not only their own identities being questioned, but their identity of part of a family is being torn apart, and they have no say in this. So the action point, Sadia, that I would be doing is we have a cadre of lawyers that are trained to be guardian ad litems, to work with children, to become their voice. So I want to make sure that the people that are being approved for this process have received training into being able to talk with children about their sexual identity. So that would be something I want to make sure that they're strong on that and that becomes as natural a part of their conversation as is anything else. Not more important, not less important, just part of that conversation.
My name's Chuck Adams. I'm the leader of Indivisible Aurora. I'm local famous. That's nice. My action item is we have put together a letter of intent to the city of Aurora to expand what was Pride Parade to the Aurora Pride Festival, covering the second weekend.
All right.
So we'll own the second weekend in June next year. And one of the things the reason I came here for is so I could stalk Ken to get his assistance. To get his assistance in doing a TED Talk-like series of conversations during that weekend. And so, there you go. You and I will chat, my friend. You and I will chat. Thank you.
It just can't be as hot as it was.
So, excuse me. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to look up Senate Bill 3249. And I'm going to see what legislators are supporting it, what legislators aren't supporting it. And I'm going to contact them. And then I'm going to share it. And I'm going to see if there's any kind of witness slips. They probably aren't out yet, but I'll encourage people to fill out witness slips to support it. And try to learn a little bit more about the bill and see what I can do to help get it passed.
So similar to Liz, I'm going to be able to do a little bit more research about that Senate bill, but I know for a fact that the representative of the 48th district will certainly not be a champion of that bill as the House floor leader. Exactly. So my action item is to walk extra hours every day so that I am the one who is elected and I can be a part of supporting that bill.
So Ken, I want to be a better political ally for you. To your point, so we have in Lisle Township, I'm the township supervisor, and we started a youth in crisis coalition around suicide prevention for youth. Liz is also a member of that. And this month, our theme, because of Pride Month, is our LGBT youth. And the fact that the suicide rate in LGBT youth is 5 times higher than any other group of youth. But based on what you're saying, I think we're doing the wrong thing. So throughout the year, we're going to weave in messaging around LGBT youth. Our concentration this month is around that youth group, but we'll weave in messaging throughout the entire year.
My name's Kaya Iverson. I am a member of this church, and one of the things I'm going to do is continue to support this church the way it has supported me for the last 20 years. Tonight, probably the first thing I'm going to do is hug my wife, because that's a good thing to do. And even though Peter Breen is not likely to change his tune, I do occasionally insist on spitting in the wind, so I will call the jerk and tell him what I think about his position on this bill. And I will continue to support the candidates that I think are going to do the right thing, like Tara and pretty much this row of people here. And that one right there, and probably some others that have slipped in. Oh, there's another one, right? Okay, they're all over the place. Isn't it awesome? Thank you.
My name is Karina Villa, and I'm the Vice President of the Board of Education in West Chicago, District 33. So I will ask my superintendent, I'll send him an email today and ask him for a list of the books that we have in our libraries that are friendly to our LGBTQT community. And if the list is very short, we'll make sure to get some more books in our libraries for that. Also, as a social worker in District 45, we had a training that was open to our staff on the topic of transgender students. And so I will also request to make sure that somehow we bring some of that training to our school district.
I'm not standing up because my balance isn't real good. My name is John Key, and I live in Chicago. And when I'm out walking around, occasionally I have seen like 2 men or 2 women holding hands, and it makes me feel really good to see that. So I always make sure to tell them, have a nice day or have a nice evening. And the first time, some years ago, when I saw that happen, the men had already walked past me. And so I yelled at them real loud, "Hey, guys!" And they turned around and looked at me, and I said, "You both look so beautiful together."
Hi there. What I'm going to do is an action item. So I'm going to work my butt off to win and be the first female ever elected in 179 years as chairman of this wonderful DuPage County. And what I'm going to do as chairman of the DuPage County is I will have $440 million in the budget. We get to decide how we're going to spend that. I'm going to make sure that that money goes to social services for the LGBTQ community, that we make sure that there are safe places, that there is education, and that we are known as a welcoming and inclusive community. Thank you.
I have a 16-year-old transgender nephew who just came out to me 2 weeks ago. And I've already, that's what my phone was going off of, because I was trying to text him the gender cool. Because he did ask me that he wants a therapist to transition. And so, I've talked to Ken about this before too, in looking for a therapist for him or a peer group. And so my action item will be the gender cool and trying to find some place positive for him to be who he is. Okay, good.
Hi, my name is Sarah Sadat. I'm an artist. I found myself when I was 3 years old. My mom gave me a little watercolor, and I was one of 500 children in India, and between all of them, I got a first place. I drew a balloon vendor on the side of the road. I knew that art was something that I could always count on. My action item, I teach at the Naperville Art League. My first class is going to be in this fall. So for January, I hope to make it more about the silhouettes, and I'm going to open it up to the children to find themselves and paint portraits of themselves, but just representing what their society is around them.
My name's Julie Resch-Jelliff, and I'm a UNISERV director with the Illinois Education Association, which is a fancy word for union rep. I represent all of the non-administrative employees in District 203. First of all, I want to thank the Supreme Court for royally screwing public education and public union employees and the entire middle class this week with the Janus decision. But we will rise, and we will rise stronger than we were before. So if they think they've defeated us, they've picked on the wrong people. What I want to say, though, as my action item is that through our building rep meetings and through my unions, I have access to all of the educational employees in District 203. And so what I will do when school starts back up is make sure that they all know about this bill and that they all know to contact their representatives and to make sure that we get this passed. And the LGBTQ rights are very important to me and something I hold dear. And so it is something that, as I talk about political action and the political future and things that will impact our students in 203, this is something that I will work into my monthly reports to my membership to make sure that we are not only supporting candidates who support public education, but who support all of our pupils so we can meet the needs of all of our students.
And then one more thing from, yes, okay. Okay. Okay, so as I'm running for County Board District 5, and what I'm gonna do is bring these UCare trainings onto the board. So we're gonna have another panel, okay guys? And we're gonna make sure that the county board, all the members here from all of us, and make sure that they have these trainings so they're aware and we can work on the issues that are needed for the LGBTQ community, so.
Hello, and I'm Leanne. My side family all sweet. My husband's family all sweet. I prefer to be sweet Sally. I have my son's work and gay a lesson in singing, so I love them all my heart. I'm really involved with this community. I like to see community work hard together to keep it so dusty.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And if you didn't get to tell us your action item, hold it in your heart and live it in your life, baby. And I want to thank our panelists again and for everyone who contributed tonight. This has been fabulous. We will do this again. We need to keep doing this. And we need to bring people here who are not the usual suspects. We need to be bringing people here, our families and other people that need to hear some of this. So please keep that in mind next time you hear us doing this. Bring a relative, bring a friend, someone who might need to hear some of this information to help them deal with some of their own personal misconceptions and misunderstandings and misinformation. So take good care, everyone.